Diana Ross walked off stage at the Frontier Hotel in Las Vegas on January 14, 1970, and the Supremes ceased to exist. Not because the group disbanded. Mary Wilson and Jean Terrell would continue performing as the Supremes for another 7 years, but because the Supremes as the world knew them, the Supremes who had defined Motown and shaped a generation, ended the moment Diana stopped being part of them. And Diana broke that night in ways she'd never broken before and would never allow herself to break again. Some of y'all remember exactly where you were when you heard about the final Supremes performance. Remember the sadness that something extraordinary was ending. Remember feeling like an era was dying right in front of you. Remember the live double album released a few months later, hearing Diana's voice break through the vinyl, crying real tears, saying goodbye to Mary and everything they'd built together. That moment defined the end of the 1960s for Black America in ways that went beyond just music. The farewell performance wasn't spontaneous emotion. It was Berry Gordy's carefully orchestrated spectacle designed to maximize Diana's solo launch. The Frontier Hotel in Las Vegas, recorded for a massive live album release. 2 performances that night, designed to capture the perfect audio track, every moment planned, every microphone placement calculated, every emotion directed towards making Diana's departure seem like necessary evolution rather than calculated abandonment. But something happened that Berry hadn't planned for. Diana actually felt it, actually experienced the weight of what she was ending, actually broke through the careful control Berry had built over 10 years and showed real, raw emotion that wasn't performance. For maybe the only time in Diana's public life, the mask slipped completely. The audience saw Diana Ross, the human being, not Diana Ross, the carefully constructed product, and that terrified Diana. The lead-up to that performance had been brutal. Rehearsals where Diana and Mary barely spoke except through intermediaries. Tension so thick the band could feel it from the orchestra pit. Berry trying to manage both women's emotions while protecting his investment in Diana's solo career. The crew documented everything, turning private pain into public spectacle. And Florence Ballard's ghost haunting everything, the missing third Supreme, fired 3 years earlier, watching from poverty while her former group performed their final show. Some of y'all understand what it feels like to end something that defines you, to walk away from people you'd built something extraordinary with, to know that what you're leaving will never exist again in the same way. Diana felt all of that standing on that Vegas stage, and Berry Gordy had taught Diana to suppress every feeling that wasn't useful for her career. But on January 14, 1970, the feelings were too big to suppress. The show opened with TCB, Taking Care of Business, appropriate title for what was actually a calculated business decision disguised as emotional farewell. Diana in white gown covered in silver beads that caught the lights like tears. Mary Wilson and Cindy Birdsong in complimentary gowns, positioned slightly behind Diana as they'd always been positioned. The hierarchy that had destroyed the original Supremes on full display, even in their final moments together. Diana's voice that night was different from usual performances, less polished, more raw. The technical perfection Berry demanded kept slipping as real emotion broke through. Mary Wilson later said Diana was actually vulnerable that night, actually present in ways she rarely allowed herself to be. The performance was messy in the most human way, and Berry was probably furious about it. The middle of the show featured hits spanning the Supremes' career: Baby Love, Stop in the Name of Love, Come See About Me, all the songs that had made them the biggest female group in history. Each song was a reminder of what was ending. Each harmony was the last time Diana and Mary's voices would blend that way. Each choreographed move was the final execution of routines they performed thousands of times. Some of y'all bought that live double album months later when it finally aired. Remember seeing Diana's face during those performances, Remember recognizing that something real was happening beyond the orchestrated farewell. Remember feeling the loss before it fully registered what was being lost. The end of the girl group era, the end of shared black female success, the beginning of solo Diana and everything that would mean. But what broke Diana completely came near the end of the show. Someday We'll Be Together was supposed to be the Supremes' final single together. Released in November 1969, it hit #1 in December. Perfect timing for the farewell performance in January. Perfect emotional send-off for the group's ending. Perfect symbolization of the bond between Diana and Mary that had survived everything. Except the song wasn't actually performed by the Supremes. The background vocals were session singers, not Mary and Cindy. Diana recorded it solo, and Motown marketed it as the Supremes' final single. Even the goodbye was a lie. Diana knew this performing Someday We'll Be Together that night. Knew that Mary knew the audience didn't know, and would think they were witnessing authentic group harmony. The deception was part of Berry's plan. Make Diana seem like loyal group member to the end, while actually establishing Diana as solo artist already. Diana had accepted these deceptions for years, but something about performing that lie in the farewell show broke something inside Diana. Some of y'all remember listening to Diana during Someday We'll Be Together on that record. Remember hearing something that sounded like genuine anguish. Remember the breathless way she called out to Mary during the final chorus. The moment sounded desperate rather than choreographed. Remember thinking you were hearing real emotion and being right. Diana was grieving what she was killing, grieving the cost of everything Berry had trained Diana to want. Mary Wilson stood next to Diana during that performance, knowing the song wasn't hers, knowing Diana had recorded it without her, knowing this entire farewell was spectacle rather than genuine goodbye. Mary's face showed hurt that no amount of professionalism could fully hide. The woman who'd stood next to Diana since they were teenagers, who'd shared everything Diana had achieved, who'd been diminished at every turn to elevate Diana. Mary was being discarded while having to smile and sing about being together someday. The audience at the Frontier Hotel that night was mostly white, mostly wealthy, mostly there for Vegas entertainment rather than genuine connection to Supreme's music. They applauded politely, enjoyed the show, went to the casino afterward. They didn't understand they were witnessing the end of something that meant everything to the black audiences who'd made the Supremes possible. Didn't understand the cultural significance of what was ending. Didn't recognize the pain underlying the performance. Berry Gordy watched from backstage, managing the spectacle he'd orchestrated, making sure the recording reels caught the right notes, making sure Diana's tears sounded beautiful rather than messy, making sure the goodbye advanced Diana's solo career rather than celebrating what the Supremes had actually been. Berry had built an empire partly on the Supremes' success, had made millions from their talent, and now Berry was dismantling the group in the way that best served Berry's next investment, solo Diana. Some of y'all understand how it feels to be managed even in your most emotional moments, to have your genuine feelings turned into spectacle for other people's profit, to grieve publicly while someone orchestrates your grief for maximum commercial impact. Diana experienced all of that on January 14, 1970, and the experience taught Diana never to be that vulnerable in public again. The show's final moments featured Diana introducing Mary Wilson and Jean Terrell to the audience, praising them, thanking them, promising they'd continue as the Supremes without Diana, positioning the group's continuation as exciting new chapter rather than as diminished version of what had been. Diana's words were gracious and careful and completely inadequate for what was actually ending. How do you sum up 10 years, dozens of hits, millions of records, shared struggle and shared triumph in a few sentences? You can't. So Diana said the expected things and left the real feelings unsaid. Mary's face during Diana's goodbye speech showed everything Diana wasn't saying, showed the hurt of being positioned as the one who stayed while Diana left for greater things, showed the resentment of a decade of being backup to Diana's lead, showed the grief of losing not just a group member, but the friend Mary thought Diana was before ambition and Berry Gordy's manipulation changed everything. Mary smiled and accepted Diana's praise while dying inside. The final bow was the moment Diana broke completely. The three women holding hands, bowing to applause, knowing this would never happen again. Diana started crying, real tears, not performance tears. Mary started crying. Cindy Birdsong started crying. Even Jean Terrell, brought up from the audience to be introduced as Diana's replacement, felt the crushing weight of what was ending. The microphones captured all of it. And Diana Ross, the carefully controlled product, shattered into Diana Ross, the human being who just killed the thing that made her.
The aftermath of that performance revealed how completely Diana had broken. Backstage, Diana collapsed, not metaphorically, literally collapsed from the emotional weight. Had to be helped to the dressing room, makeup streaming down Diana's face, the white gown Diana had worn for the farewell covered in tears and sweat. Berry Gordy trying to manage the situation, trying to get Diana pulled together for the second performance that night, trying to contain the emotional spillover that threatened the careful narrative. Some of y'all have experienced that kind of complete emotional collapse. When you've held everything together for so long that when you finally let go, everything falls apart at once. When the performance ends and you're left with just the raw reality of what you've done. Diana experienced that backstage at the Frontier Hotel, and it terrified Diana because Diana had spent a decade learning to never lose control. Berry had taught Diana that control was everything, and in that moment, Diana had none. The second performance that night was different. Diana had pulled herself together, reinstalled the mask, delivered the professionalism Berry demanded, but something had changed. The vulnerability from the first show was gone, replaced by the polished distance Diana normally maintained. The audience at the second show saw a great performance, but they didn't see the rawness, the humanity, the genuine grief that the first audience and rolling tape reels had captured. Diana had learned a lesson: never be that exposed again. Mary Wilson later wrote about that night with a mixture of sadness and anger. Sadness for what ended, anger about how it ended, anger about being positioned as the one left behind while Diana got the farewell special, the solo contract, the continued fame. Mary would keep the Supremes going for 7 more years, performing the hits, maintaining the legacy. But Mary would never achieve the solo success Diana achieved. And that night in Vegas marked the beginning of Mary's awareness that Diana's departure would define Mary's entire future. Florence Ballard wasn't at that performance. Florence had been fired in 1967, 3 years before the farewell, had watched the Supremes continue without her, had struggled with poverty and obscurity while Diana became more successful. Florence's absence haunted that final performance because Florence should have been there, should have been the third woman on that stage instead of Cindy Birdsong, should have shared in the goodbye to something Florence had helped create. But Berry had removed Florence years earlier, and Florence's exclusion from even the farewell showed how completely Florence had been erased. Some of y'all remember Florence's story and felt the tragedy of her absence from that farewell performance. Remember thinking about how different things could have been if Berry had valued all 3 women equally. Remember recognizing that Diana's success and Florence's destruction were 2 sides of the same coin. Berry's strategy required elevating one and eliminating the others. The farewell performance was the culmination of that strategy, the final public demonstration of who mattered and who didn't. Berry Gordy's response to Diana's breakdown was to tighten control,
to make sure Diana never lost control like that again, to train Diana more thoroughly in suppressing authentic emotion in favor of professional polish. The vulnerability Diana showed that night was weakness in Berry's eyes, weakness that could threaten Diana's solo career if it happened again. So Berry taught Diana to never be that human in public again, and Diana learned the lesson perfectly. The live double album that dropped months later edited Diana's breakdown carefully, mixed the tears but cut the complete collapse, kept the emotion but kept it within acceptable bounds, made Diana's grief sound beautiful rather than messy, turned genuine human pain into polished audio entertainment. The audience listening to the record heard what Berry wanted them to hear: emotional farewell that positioned Diana's solo career as natural evolution. They didn't hear the real cost, the real pain, the real damage that transition caused. Diana's solo career officially launched immediately after the farewell performance. New recording sessions, new promotional campaign, new image positioning Diana as individual artist rather than group member. Everything moved forward with Berry's characteristic efficiency. But Diana wasn't the same person who'd walked onto that Vegas stage. Something had broken that night that never fully healed. The cost of becoming Diana Ross, solo superstar, was killing the Supremes, and Diana would spend the rest of her life managing the consequences of that choice. Some of y'all watched Diana's solo career with mixed feelings: pride in Diana's continued success, sadness about what ended to make that success possible, awareness that the Supremes represented something collective and supportive that solo Diana could never replicate, understanding that Diana's solo achievements, however extraordinary, came at a price that included genuine human connection and shared success. Diana Ross is 80 years old now. The farewell performance at the Frontier Hotel happened 55 years ago. Mary Wilson died in 2021, taking with her any possibility of genuine reconciliation or shared reflection on what the Supremes meant. Florence Ballard died in 1976, poor and forgotten. The three women who created the Supremes never performed together again after 1967, when Florence was fired. The farewell performance in 1970 was Diana and Mary's goodbye, but not the original Supremes' goodbye. That had happened 3 years earlier, without fanfare, without television cameras, without the world noticing. The legacy of that farewell performance is complicated. It marked the end of the girl group era. After the Supremes broke up, no female group achieved the same level of sustained commercial success for decades. It demonstrated that even the most successful black-female collaborations would eventually be dismantled in favor of solo stardom. It showed that Berry Gordy's model of success required individual stars, not groups sharing glory. And it broke Diana in ways that shaped the rest of Diana's life and career. Some of y'all remember that farewell performance as the moment you knew things were changing, the moment you recognized that the 1960s were truly over, the moment you understood that the collective success the Supremes represented was being replaced by individual achievement, the moment you felt the loss of something you couldn't quite name but knew was important. That performance wasn't just the Supremes' ending, it was the end of a specific kind of black female success that prioritized group harmony over individual stardom. Diana never talks about that night with any real honesty, references it occasionally in interviews as emotional or difficult, but never discusses the breakdown, the genuine grief, the cost of that transition. Diana's public narrative about the Supremes' ending focuses on gratitude for the experience and excitement about solo career. The real feelings, the pain, the guilt, the loss, stay private. Diana learned from Berry that weakness is weakness, and Diana hasn't unlearned that lesson in 55 years. The question that haunts that farewell performance is whether it had to happen that way, whether Diana could have gone solo without the spectacle, without the public dissolution, without positioning Mary as the one left behind, whether the Supremes could have ended with more dignity, more equality, more recognition of shared contribution. Berry Gordy orchestrated it the way he did because that's what served Berry's interests. But Diana chose to participate, chose to be the one who left, chose solo success over group loyalty, and lived with those choices ever since. Mary Wilson's autobiography, published years later, included poignant reflections on that farewell performance. Mary wrote about feeling abandoned, about recognizing that Diana had always prioritized solo career over group unity, about the pain of being positioned as secondary even in the group's final moments. Mary's words revealed hurt that decades hadn't healed, revealed awareness that Diana's success required Mary's diminishment, revealed the cost of Berry's strategy to everyone except Diana and Berry himself. Some of y'all understand what it means to be the Mary in someone else's success story, to be essential to something's creation but excluded from credit, to watch someone else get celebrated for work you shared, to have your contribution erased so someone else can shine brighter. Mary Wilson lived that reality from 1963 until her death in 2021, and the farewell performance in 1970 was the moment that reality became permanent and public. Diana's breakdown that night was the last time Diana allowed herself to fully feel the cost of her choices, the last time Diana was genuinely vulnerable about what she'd sacrificed for success. After that night, Diana perfected the control Berry had been teaching her for years, became the polished, distant, carefully managed Diana Ross that the public knows. The human being who broke at the Frontier Hotel got locked away, and what remained was the product Berry had spent a decade creating. The Supremes' farewell performance broke Diana, but it also completed her transformation into the solo superstar Berry envisioned. The Diana who walked off that Vegas stage wasn't the Diana who'd walked on. The girl group member was dead. The solo star was born. And the cost of that birth, genuine human connection, vulnerability, shared success, real friendship, would define Diana's life for the next 55 years. Do you remember listening to the Supremes' farewell performance when the album dropped? Did you understand at the time what was really ending? Drop a comment sharing your memories of that night, or tell us about times when you've had to end something that defined you. Hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another trip down memory lane.